Good day. Welcome to P&G online tutorial class. Today we are going to looking at a concept that affects everybody. It's a global challenge, and that is inflation. It's something that is biting very hard. On a daily basis, all of us can all relate with the effect of inflation in the economy. The price of goods and services are rising, and the cost of living is rising, and the value of money is falling. Currently, on average, the global inflation rate is about 1.9%. Countries like United States of America has currently inflation rate of about 2.9%. And when we come down to the sub-Saharan Africa, let's take Nigeria as a case study. Nigeria has an inflation rate of 34.8%. That is a very huge one. And this is affecting people's means of livelihood. The cost of transportation is going up, cost of food is going up, cost of having some basic necessity of lives. So therefore, this concept is something that affects each and every one of us. So the question is, what is inflation? Inflation can be defined as a persistent increase in price or rise in the general price of goods and services over a given period of time, usually a year. So if there is an increase in price of commodities and goods and services, a general increase, it's not just about a city, not just about a locality or about a town, but it's something that is general to a geographical region, most especially a country. And this persists over a period of time. It could be quarterly or yearly. Then it is known as inflation. As you can see the image here, you observe that in the image, you see that the cost of items here going up. You can see the arrow is rising, which indicates inflation. However, in a layman language, inflation can simply mean when too much money is circulation, is chasing figures in a layman language. So the question now is that what are some types of inflation that we have? Well, before we go to type, I want to give you an illustration here that also help us to see what inflation is all about. You can see this image here. This is a cup of coffee. In the year 1970, this cup of coffee was 25 cents. As you can see the image here, just 25 cents. Then what happened in the year 1980? It increased to 45 cents. In the year 1990, that same cost of that same coffee does not increase in quantity, neither is it increasing in quality. It has increased to 75 cents. Then by the year 2000, it becomes $1. Then in the year 2010, that same cup of coffee of the same quality and quantity, even in some instances, possibly is losing the quantity or quality, is being sold for $1.25. And of course, by the year 2020, it has become $1.75. That is a cost of inflation. That is what inflation does. It leads to the general increase in prices of goods and services, in which we all depend on for a daily sustenance. Now, let's move to the types of inflation. Well, there are many types of inflation that we can look at, but I just give you some samples here. Here we have what is known as demand pull inflation. We have the cost push inflation. We have persistent or creeping inflation. We have galloping or jumping inflation. We have hyper or runaway inflation. However, in this course or in this study, we are going to look at the major two, which are the first two there, and that is the demand pull inflation and the cost push inflation. So our understanding of this will help us to see how we ourselves, as consumers, we are contributing at times to inflation in the country, and how the producer as well could also contribute to inflation in the country. So we are going to look at these two, demand pull inflation and cost push inflation, in this course. So let's look at the first one, which is the demand pull inflation. Now, what is demand pull inflation? This is simply when consumers, buyers, you and I, who go to the market on daily basis or who patronize those who are selling one goods or the other on daily basis, when we have a high purchasing power because we have too much coins in our hands. Therefore, leads to us we build demand for a higher quantity of products, whereby the supply of that product remain constant. So it means that demand is increasing, whereby supply remain constant. I'll give an instance. Let's assume that there are 10 persons who have been demanding for 10 loaves of bread. Now, these 10 persons, each one of them is demanding for 1 loaf each. And the producer of the bread has only 10 loaves to sell to each one of them. Now, let's assume that these people, or let's say there are 5 out of them, they are able to have increment in salary. And they are not able now, or they are not demanding for extra 1 loaf each, making 5 extra. If you add the 5 to the 10 that all the 10 persons are demanding before, it makes it to be 15. So under that instance now, you observe that the producer is not able to increase 10. He can only produce 10, but they are demanding for 15 loaves. So automatically, the market will sense it, and this will lead to increase in the price of loaves of bread. Why? What caused that? Is because the consumers, they are increasing their demand, whereby supply remain constant. So I can see the image here. You can see this producer is keep on pushing, demanding for more products, such that the price of these items is increasing in the market. So whenever there is an increase in aggregate demand, but the supply remains constant or is not increasing as the demand is increasing, the aftermath result of that will be a demand pull inflation. So therefore, demand pull inflation is a concept, or is an attribute, or is as a result of the consumers. They are the one that cause demand pull inflation. Why? Because they now have higher purchasing power, which is making them to demand for more products, whereby the supply of such a product remain constant. So that is what is known as a demand pull inflation. Now, question now is that the causes, what could have led to that consumers could just have much money in their hands to demand for more of a product, whereby the supply of that product remain constant? No, one of the reason for that could be low interest rate. That is, when the consumer goes to the market, and go to the bank rather, they are able to get price or to get loans at a cheaper rate, low interest rate. So that now they are demanding for more loans, and as a result of that, they have too much money in their hand, and that will trigger demand pull inflation. Another one is low income or corporate tax. That is, income tax is the tax that workers do pay on monthly basis to the government, whereby corporate tax is that tax that governments, or that firms rather, pay to the government at the end of the month or a period. Now, if this is very low, then the consumer or the workers, they will have high purchasing power because they are paying less to the government in terms of tax, and with that now they have more money for them to spend. Another one is the increase in consumer or business confidence. If consumer or business sense that the economy is doing very well, they will be willing to purchase more products. Another one is increase in government spending. Government do spend money to whenever they make budgets. When government make budgets, also on expenses. They build roads, they build bridges, they build schools, and other infrastructure. Now, when government is doing these activities, economic activities of infrastructure development, they are spending money to the economy, and this money is going to who? Is going to the general populate, who getting this money by being government contractors or by working in companies that. Another one that can also lead to this is weak exchange rate as well. If there is a weak exchange in the economy, that can also lead to a demand pull inflation. Now, the question now is that how would a curve of a demand pull inflation looks like? As an economics student, it's very, very important that you are able to know how to draw this demand pull inflation graph. Now, the graph will look like this. Here we are going to have on the vertical line, we are going to have the price, and the horizontal line, we are going to have aggregate demand. So here is a price. You are going to construct it there, the price of the items, and here will be aggregate demand, which is represented by the letter Y. This stands for real GDP. I meant to say, sorry, this is real GDP, the real GDP there. That is what that letter Y stands for, real GDP. Real GDP. Now, because we have our, then you are going to construct your aggregate demand curve. So let's start with aggregate supply first of all. Yes, aggregate supply curve. Aggregate supply curve. Then we have our aggregate demand, which is represented with AD, aggregate demand. Now, because of the point of interception, they do intercept here, it will lead to what is known as point of equilibrium. So here's our point of equilibrium, and as a result of that, if you trace the point of equilibrium to the real GDP, we are going to have the real GDP, which is what is being produced in the economy by the producer, and here is the price of the item. So here we have our Y1, which stands for the real GDP, which is the output, total output that producers are producing in the economy, and here is the price, which is stands for P1, the price of the items. Now, remember, we said when we are talking about demand pull inflation, is as a result of aggregate demand is increasing, whereby aggregate supply remains constant. So because it is increasing, the aggregate demand, of course, will shift outward because it's increasing. When it increases, it shifts outward or shift to the right. So when it shifts outward, here we are going to have our AD2, which aggregate demand 2. Now, what will be the result of this increase in aggregate demand? The result is very simple. Now, because of this, it's going to lead to a new equilibrium point. A new equilibrium point here, as you can see it here. We can call this way E2. This E2, whereby this one, the first one here is E1. That is E1. So if you trace this now to price, let's rotate it to the GDP, real GDP, and then we trace it to price as well. Have you seen it now? Now, what do we observe? That the result of demand pull inflation is this. Price, look at the new price. Here's our P2. Price has increased from P1 to P2. Are you seeing it now? Price increases, whereby the aggregate demand, here is Y2, also has shifted outward from Y1 to Y2. So whenever there is a demand pull inflation, the result is that there will be an increase in aggregate demand, whereby the price of the items will also increase. So that's what we call inflation. You can see price has increased from P1 here to P2. Now we now want to move to our next types of inflation we are considering, and that is cost push inflation. Now, cost push inflation, this is when there is an increase in the cost of production, which the producer will then pass on to the consumers in form of high price of goods and services. Now, this one now is not a factor of the consumers. It's not as if the consumer, they have too much money in their hands. That is why the price of the item increases. But this one is a factor of the producers who are producing the economy, who are producing the common goods and services that you and I depend on. Now, the question is that why would this producer, why would they increase the price of the unit price of their products? Is as a result of the fact that their inputs has increased in price. And what are some of these inputs? We have raw materials, we have wages, we have cultivated products. So whenever there is an increase in input prices, then the price of raw materials has increased, they are paying laborers at a high price, they are buying machineries and equipment at a high price, then you have no other option than to push that extra burden to the consumer who are buying it in terms of increasing price of the unit price of the product. So that will lead to increase in price of goods and services. So cost push inflation is a factor of the producer, not the consumer, as it was in that of demand pull inflation. Now, we now want to look at causes of this. Well, like I've explained some of them, though I still want to highlight them here. One of the causes of demand pull inflation, as highlighted on the board here, is that as a result of increase in raw materials, the price of raw materials has increased, rather increase in raw materials prices, it has gone up. So they have no other option than to charge more. Then increase in labor wages, that is, the wages they are paying labor has increased, like I've mentioned. Then increase in business tax, which is the tax that the producer pay to the government. This also has increase in value, so that could also lead to that. Then increase in price of imported goods, because some of the raw materials that these producers use, they also import them from other countries. So because there's an increase in these imported goods, which they also use as part of the raw material, because some of these are capital goods we use in the process of production, we will make them to increase the price of the product in the long run. So how will the graph of a cost push inflation look like? Remember, for a cost push inflation, it is the aggregate supply that is increasing, and as a result of that, it makes price to jump or to increase. So let's draw the graph. Here we are going to have our price, and here is our real GDP here, like we did for the previous one. So here we have price, and here we have our real GDP, which represents with Y. Real GDP represents Y. Now, what happened is that here we have our aggregate supply, which is AS, and here we have aggregate demand, AD. And as a result of the aggregate supply and aggregate demand, there is a point of equilibrium, which will be done here, our E1, point of equilibrium, E1. And because of that, if you trace this equilibrium point to the real GDP, we are going to have our first output, which is our Y1. Then here we are going to have our P1, which is the initial price. Now what happened is that there's an issue now in the economy, is that the price of goods and services has increased, and as a result of that, the producer cannot be able to produce as much as they used to produce before, because of the cost of production is very high. And what will happen? They will have to reduce their aggregate supply. So because they are using the aggregate supply will shift inward, and it will give us something like this, aggregate supply. So we can call this one AS2. Now, question is that now that they have increased their aggregate supply, they reduced their aggregate supply. Now, question is, what will be the result of this? Look at the results. Remember, a new equilibrium point has been formed here. We call it E2. A new equilibrium point has been formed there. Are you seeing it now? Now, trace this equilibrium point to the real GDP. Are you seeing it? We call this one now Y2. You can see that now. And trace it to price. This becomes what? P2. You can see it, right? Good. So what you observe is that price has increased from P1 to P2, and the real GDP fell from Y1 to Y2. So what does that mean? That means that anytime there is a cost push inflation, the total products being produced by the producer will shrink or will shift or will reduce in level, while our price will go up. But because price goes up, therefore it's an inflation. So I believe you enjoyed this class. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Share. There are students of economics and other related subjects who might need this course. Share to them. Let them have it. And looking forward to the next time when we are going to meet again. Thank you. Bye for now.